This day in sports history. It's July 11th, and on this day in 1979, Bobby Knight got arrested in Puerto Rico. Bobby Knight was coaching the U.S. men's basketball team, at this point made up of collegians, and the team and Coach Knight were in Puerto Rico for the Pan American Games. Bobby was the head coach, and a young Mike Krzyzewski was his assistant. Well, the team was getting ready for their semifinal game, or at least they were trying to. When the team showed up at the gym, the Brazilian women's team had already claimed it and were practicing. There were some words exchanged, with the volume escalating a bit, and then the local San Juan police got involved. Well, instead of diffusing the situation, that seemed to only make things more volatile, and in the process, Knight punched Officer Juan de Silva in the jaw with his right hand. That's really not a good idea anywhere in the world, and he was promptly arrested and put in jail. He was released and allowed to coach the semifinal and the final, with Team USA winning both and taking the gold medal. His trial was set for August 22nd, and he was allowed to leave the country with the understanding that he'd be back. Knight did not return to Puerto Rico, and he was found guilty in absentia and sentenced to 6 months in jail. Puerto Rican authorities attempted to extradite Coach Knight, but they were unsuccessful. Initially, Coach Knight was not only unapologetic, but he fanned the flames of controversy, saying, "The only thing they know how to do is grow bananas." Later, he added, Come on, I'll tell you what, their basketball is a hell of a lot easier to beat than their court system." Eventually, though, he did issue a letter of apology to the president of the Puerto Rico Olympic Committee, saying, "I feel very sorry for all the misunderstandings that resulted from that incident, and I deeply appreciate those people like you who, whether they agree with me or not, are willing to bring this chapter to a close." On this day in 1970, it was one of the most devastating misses in golf history. Doug Sanders was a colorful golfer. You couldn't miss him out on the fairways. He was a rainbow of color in the dull gray of the PGA. He had a closet full of color-coordinated outfits, which earned him the moniker the Peacock of the Fairways. Esquire magazine named him one of the top 10 best-dressed jocks in 1972. And he was a guy who was equally comfortable hanging with Sinatra or Dean Martin or Bob Hope as he was with Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus. He won 20 PGA tournaments in his career, and despite the shots he had to hit and the putts he had to make to win 20 times on tour, Doug Sanders is known more for the putt he missed on this day 55 years ago. It was the Open Championship at St. Andrews. After 3 rounds, Lee Trevino had a 2-shot lead over the trio of Nicklaus, Sanders, and the '69 Open winner, Tony Jacklin. Sanders was paired with Trevino for Saturday's final round, and he was decked out in a coordinating purple combo, sweater, slacks, and matching golf shoes. It was a windy day on the east coast of Scotland, and Trevino struggled a bit with the blustery conditions, shooting a 77 to fall a couple of shots off the pace. Even though Sanders looked great on the golf course, his golf swing was a bit unconventional. He slashed at the ball with a 3/4 compact swing, and many people said he could swing a golf club in a phone booth. He hit his approach at 17 into the road hole bunker, and there were a lot of players who would simply been dead in that position. Instead, he pulled off a beauty of a shot.
Doug Sanders is about to hit what, without any doubt, is the most important single golf shot of his life. There you see it. It's a very difficult log. Spectacular golf shot.
He saved par with that bunker shot, and if he had gone on to win, people would have been talking about that bunker shot for the next half century, who knows. With Nicklaus's long birdie attempt at 18 just missing, it left Sanders in a position of needing only a par at the 18th to secure his first major tournament title. Now, the 18th hole at St. Andrews is the old Tom Morris hole. It's only 358 yards in length, with a wide open space to hit your tee shot and an enormous undulating green. Well, Well, after his tee shot, he had only a short iron into the green, but he did not hit it very well. It went past the hole a good 60 feet. He was left with a 2-putt from that distance to win. His downhill breaker came up 30 inches short. Trevino rolled in his 15-footer for his par, and then he stepped back to allow Sanders to soak in the moment and roll his putt in for the win. But what happened next was heartbreaking. Now, it was not a straight putt. It had a little left-to-right break to it. Sanders was also a very deliberate player. He stalked and looked and stalked and looked at it from another angle. He lined it up. He stood over it, his lavender pant legs flapping in the breeze. The wind blew something into his line, and he leaned down to pick it up, lined up his putt again, and stood over it again. And he stayed there. And finally,
missed it. Yes, certainty. Yes, that's the side you're bound to miss it. And there it is. And there, but for the grace of God.
It is agonizing to see him, after he hits it, he chases it with his putter, seemingly wanting to draw it back to him and hit it again. Trevino's reaction is telling as well. Just as the putt slid by, he turned away. He couldn't look at it. He was pained by what he had just seen. Sanders tapped in for bogey to finish the round with a 73, and now was in a tie with Nicklaus. Now, Sanders was asked about that putt for the rest of his life, and at one point he said, "There are times when that putt does not cross my mind for a full 5 minutes." And reflecting on it many years later, he talked about the multiple mistakes he made on the 18th hole.
I walked from after I hit the tee shot, I was 76 yards from the pin. I walked up there. Instead of just going ahead, all full of vinegar and everything, and knocking the ball up on the green, just playing it by feel, by eyeing it, I walked up to see how far it was. I don't know. Maybe I was showboating a little bit. I don't know. But when I walked back, I knew I could hit this club 80 yards. And I was pumped up a little bit. Instead of playing it by feel as I had all week long, I played it by the yardage, trying to be sure I got over the thing. Today, I know I would have put that ball a lot closer. I looked down on that green, and I thought I saw a little pebble, but it's where the sun had made one of those little spots brown. And I started to pick it up, and I realized it wasn't anything, and I never got myself back in the right stance. And that's when Ben Hogan told Ken Steele, says, back away, back away. And of course, that's another mistake I made. I didn't back away. You don't win until you win, you know, and I was thinking about which side of the fairway, which side of the gallery I was going to bow to. So all of these things, that's a time that I was not a champion. There I was putting all the other stuff in front of me before I won the championship.
So Sanders and Nicklaus played an 18-hole playoff the next day, with Nicklaus parring the first 15 holes and going up by 4 shots at one point during the day. Sanders did manage to birdie 18 in the Sunday playoff, but so too did Nicklaus, who was 1 shot better than Sanders. For Nicklaus, it was his second claret jug out of the 3 that he would win in his career, and for Sanders, it was the 4th time he'd finished second in a major tournament, and he would never again be in contention for another one. 3 years later, the Open Championship was held at Royal Troon. So on this day in '73, 71-year-old Gene Sarazen had one of the most magical shots in tournament history. Officially, he was in the golf tournament, but really he was just there having some fun and playing the first 2 rounds with the fellas. This was the first round of the tournament. Sarazen stepped up to the well-known par 3 8th hole called the Postage Stamp because of its tiny green. At just 128 yards, it is a bite-sized hole. Well, the seemingly ageless Sarazen hit a 5-iron off the tee and then watched it roll into the cup for an ace. In the second round, he holed out from the bunker for a 2 using a sand wedge, which was a club that he'd developed 40 years before. So he experimented with different clubs to extricate his ball from sand in the early 30s, but when he was taking flying lessons from Howard Hughes, he took notice of how the plane's tail adjusted down when landing. Well, that struck something inside Sarazen's analytical mind. and after tinkering a bit, surreptitiously debuted his newfangled sand wedge at the 1932 Open Championship. Sarazen went on to win the 32 Open Championship with his secret weapon, cloaked amongst his other niblicks. On this day in 1914, Babe Ruth made his Major League debut as a pitcher for the Boston Red Sox. He pitched a solid 7 innings against the Cleveland Indians, allowing 8 hits and 2 earned runs. At the plate, Ruth went 0 for 2, but he didn't really need to do more. Boston won 4-3, and Babe picked up his first Major League win. This was one of just 4 games he appeared in that season as a 19-year-old. And on this day in 1967, it was the longest Major League Baseball All-Star game in terms of innings ever played. The National League All-Stars scored 1 in the second when Philadelphia's Dick Allen hit a solo shot. The Americans tied it up in the 6th when Baltimore's Brooks Robinson hit a home run with none on. And it stayed that way until the 15th when Cincinnati's Tony Perez connected on a catfish hunter fastball for another solo shot. The American League could not match it in the bottom half, and the Nationals won 2-1. The 15 innings stood alone as the longest All-Star game until 2008, when another 15-inning Midsummer Classic was played. The 2008 game also lasted 4 hours 50 minutes, making it the longest by time as well. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Inside the Magic Kingdom's castle at Walt Disney World in Orlando, there is a secret suite. It was built to be the office of Walt Disney himself, but he died before the castle was completed. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.